Hey, what's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This is JB right here, host of the Behind the Bench Podcast Network and channel. Just want to give a shout out to the rest of the crew. I'm talking about Shad, Kelvin, and Jermaine. And for everyone who is tuning in, I hope that you support Behind the Bench and become a subscriber and help make the podcast the best that it can be. Now, check it out. Check it out. The NBA All-Star Game. I did some research, and the inaugural NBA All-Star Game took place in 1951. So this was like 5 years after the NBA was founded. And they came up with the concept of presenting an All-Star Game that featured the best players in the league representing both the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. And that format was promoted year after year after year, decade after decade after decade. So we're talking about the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. And the first half of the 2010s. And throughout that duration of time, during the history of the NBA, I don't recall people complaining about the format. Now back during the 80s, they used to hold it used to be called the NBA Legends Game, where they would feature retired greats, legendary greats of the past, like John Havlicek, Bob Cousy, Willis Reed. All those past greats participated in that game. Rick Barry. But they had to put an end to that game because those retired players got older and they couldn't really go out there and play anymore. Okay, so you understand that. You say, okay, they ran its course. You know what I'm saying? And then, of course, you had the NBA Slam Dunk Contest, which actually took place, and they revised the Slam Dunk Contest after the original dunk contest from the ABA took place, I believe, in 1977, when Dr. J and David Thompson squared off, and Emil Carr. And then the NBA included that event for its All-Star Weekend in 1984 when Larry Nance defeated Dr. J. But as far as the actual game itself, the format was always Eastern Conference versus Western Conference. It was for bragging rights to see which conference featured the best players. Now, we're talking about the 24 best players in the world. That's how they used to be always promoted in that fashion. The 24 best players in the world. The 12 best players in the East versus the 12 best players in the West. And the fans would vote for the starters in each conference, and then the coaches would select the reserves. Oh, it was a great system. It was a great system. And then all of a sudden, tradition was scrapped for this new concept. Team this guy, team that guy. And it took away from when you do that, think about it. 1951, and I believe they changed the format around 2017. So we're talking like 50, 66 years, and all of a sudden you just scrap it because certain people or certain players were tired of the format. You can't do that. You can't do that. And for the past 5 years, we've seen this new format that you knew wasn't gonna last. that you knew was not going to hold any weight in the end. And it produced non-competitive basketball between the game's best players. Now, the game itself is supposed to be an exhibition of the greatest players in the world. But it didn't even seem like an exhibition anymore. It was almost like like a game of horse. I'm a dunk, then you follow with a dunk, like a circus dunk. I'm gonna shoot about 23s, and I'm gonna come. Then the next guy gonna come down and try to shoot 23s, and it took away from the competitive fervor between both conferences in terms of the players that's representing the East and the West. That was the excitement. East versus West, West versus East. Let's see who the best. And like Horace Grant said in an interview he did a couple years ago, he said during the 90s, they saw it as bragging rights. We got the best players. The East got the best players, or the West got the best players. It was pride in it. So therefore, the game was more competitive. Now, don't get me wrong. Someone make a steal, and then players will let that guy, go unimpeded and do like a great dunk, a crowd pleasing dunk. I get that. But the fabric of the game, the essence of the All-Star game, was never compromised. If you was known, had a reputation for playing great defense, you was playing great defense in that game. If your reputation was being physical down low on the block while guarding your man, you displayed that and showcased that in an All-Star game. Whatever your forte was, we saw it on the grandest stage when the 24 best players squared up against each other. But that new format took the whole element away. And it all culminated this year when the All-Star game fell flat on its face, and you heard one complaint after the next, one complaint after the next. And it was never ending. And the ratings proved the fact that they need to scrap this unforeseen format and return back to the real format, the original format, the true format. And that's what they're going to do. So we get our real game back beginning next season, East versus West. And I think the competition will elevate the way it's supposed to be, to where you ain't got to come up with these gimmicks to try to encourage these players to play at their highest level. Because this year's All-Star game, if that wasn't a sign that they needed to put an end to that, the new format, team this guy versus team that guy, I don't know what more it was going to take. But like I said, the real always returns back. Everything returns back full circle to where ultimately where it's supposed to be eventually. I think one reason why the original format was scrapped, the true format, was because of the negative impact and influence of the super team. Because we've seen so many super teams over these past 13 years that the super team itself is like a mini version of an all-star team, like a pseudo all-star team. So it takes the novelty away from what the all-star game represented. And if you notice, the end of the super team is coinciding with the game returning back to its true essence. And once again, it just shows the negative impact of this era of super teaming, because 3 franchise level superstar players should not be joining alliances and playing with each other as teammates, especially in their prime. So I'm just glad to see it returning back. It's been a long time waiting, and the basketball fans, man, that grew up prior to this change, they've been waiting with open arms for the real format to return back. So I'm looking forward to it, and I just want to drop that, and can't wait to see it next year. So this is JB right here, and until next time, BTB, Behind the Bench.